Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're jumping straight into Part 11 of our 12-part fire safety course for education and care settings, focusing entirely on evacuation and special considerations. We're going to unpack exactly how to safely evacuate vulnerable individuals during a fire, moving from those big building-wide strategies right down to very specific individual needs. Because let's be real, a beautifully written fire policy, it's completely useless if it hasn't been tailored to the exact realities of the people you support. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll cover 1. Evacuation strategies explained, 2. Personal emergency evacuation plans, 3. Essential evacuation equipment, 4. Nighttime and reduced staffing, 5. Supporting people with dementia, and finally, 6. Drills and post-fire protocols. Let's get into it.
Starting off with Section 1, Evacuation Strategies Explained.
You know, different settings actually require entirely opposite strategies. On one end of the spectrum, we've got simultaneous evacuation. You see this a lot in schools or standard offices. The alarm sounds and boom, absolutely everyone leaves the building at the exact same time and heads to a designated assembly point. But then, look at the complete opposite approach, the stay-put strategy. This is often used in purpose-built blocks of flats, and it relies heavily on strict compartmentation. Basically, each flat is built like a fortress to resist fire and contain it, which keeps the other residents safe while they stay exactly where they are. And then we have progressive horizontal evacuation, which is heavily used in places like care homes and hospitals. The core concept here? It's all about buying time. Instead of rushing vulnerable people all the way outside into the elements, residents are just moved sideways. You literally move them through fire doors, out of the fire zone, and into an adjacent protected compartment. It's a clever structural design that buys you a crucial 30 to 60 minutes of safety before any full outside evacuation is even necessary. But this brings us to a really critical pivot. We've looked at the building itself, but what happens when the building's plan requires vertical evacuation, like moving downstairs, and you have individuals whose mobility, sensory, or cognitive needs prevent them from simply following a standard green exit sign? That leads us perfectly into Section 2, Personal Emergency Evacuation Plans. Also known as PEEPs. The crucial point here is that a PEEP grades dependency. It ensures that every single unique sensory, medical, or mobility need is planned for well in advance. Look, it isn't just some generic checkbox form. It's a highly specific roadmap. It details exactly what kind of help is needed, the specific equipment to use, and exactly which named assistants are responsible for providing that help. Simply put, anyone who cannot just walk out of a building unaided must have one of these, and your staff needs to know them inside and out. Now, we need to look ahead to a vital upcoming change that's responding directly to the Grenfell Tower inquiry. Starting on April 6, 2026, new legal duties are coming into force in England. Residents in high-rise buildings who cannot self-evacuate are going to have the right to request person-centered fire risk assessments. This results in a formal residential PEEP statement. And critically, the relevant info from these statements must be shared with the fire and rescue service. This is huge because it means they'll know exactly who needs help and exactly where they are before they even arrive on the scene. Moving on to Section 3, Essential Evacuation Equipment. To actually execute a PEEP, you need the right toolkit, right? Evacuation chairs are fantastic for safely carrying a person down the stairs. Meanwhile, sludges and ski sheets allow you to smoothly slide them along the floor or down the steps. For bedbound individuals, especially at night, evacuation mattresses or ski pads that are placed permanently right under their normal mattress allow for incredibly rapid horizontal moves. But here's the catch. Having the right equipment matched directly to a person's PEEP is really only half the battle. Staff absolutely must be rigorously trained on how to use it, and the gear itself has to be flawlessly maintained. All right, Section 4, Nighttime and Reduced Staffing. Think about when residents are asleep, and staffing is naturally reduced. That's when progressive horizontal evacuation and actual night shift drills become absolute lifesavers. Listen, it is nowhere near enough to have an evacuation plan that works perfectly at 2 p.m. when you've got 20 staff members on site. If a fire breaks out at 3 a.m. and you only have 3 staff members around, your plan absolutely must realistically reflect that. Everyone on that night shift needs extremely clear roles and absolute confidence in using all that evacuation equipment. Next up, Section 5, Supporting people with dementia. In an emergency, frightened individuals might actually try to hide or even return to their rooms. The blaring noise of an alarm and all that sudden commotion, it can be absolutely terrifying, especially for someone living with dementia. So using their name, giving really simple, clear instructions, and never leaving them unaccounted for is just vital. You really have to draw on what you know about that specific person from their care plan. Above all, stay calm, reassure and guide them. Don't rush them because that's only going to increase their distress and resistance. And finally, Section 6, Drills and Post-Fire Protocols. You really should be varying the times of your drills. I mean, if you only ever run a drill on a Tuesday morning, you're leaving yourselves incredibly vulnerable. Try blocking off a primary exit just to test how well your staff adapt and find alternative routes. And you need to actually deploy your evacuation equipment to build true confidence. Don't just point at the evacuation chair in the corner. Have your staff physically practice with the thing. Every single drill should be recorded, timed, and most importantly, learned from. And remember this golden rule. Treat a real alarm as the most important drill of all. Never ever just assume it's a false alarm. Now, if a real fire does occur, the response definitely doesn't end the second you step outside the building. Having structured post-fire protocols is absolutely key. Number 1, account for absolutely everyone. 2, never re-enter the building until the fire service explicitly tells you it is safe to do so. 3, preserve the scene for the investigators. 4, know your reporting duties. Certain fires legally have to be reported under RIDOR. 5, provide deep emotional support. Fires are highly traumatic events, for sure. And finally, number 6, review exactly what happened so you can update your risk assessments and continuity plans. Like we said at the start, a beautifully written fire policy is completely useless if it hasn't been tailored to the exact realities of the people you support. So take a hard look at your PEEPs, your equipment, and your drill logs today, and ask yourself this. If the alarm sounds at 3 a.m. tonight, does every single vulnerable person in your care have a practiced, guaranteed path to safety? Something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.